July 1844, Vicksburg, Mississippi. Silas Belmont cracked his whip across a 15-year-old girl's back and howled, "You are nothing but property!" Her twin sister, white as porcelain, screamed from across the auction yard, and an identical wound split open her skin. The crowd froze. The auctioneer stumbled backward. Two girls, one black, one white, bleeding from the same wound no whip had touched twice. Silas saw it. He didn't flinch. He grabbed both girls by the chain and snarled, "I'll take them. Whatever devil lives inside them, I'll beat it out or bury it." If this story moves you, I ask you to subscribe to our channel and follow this story all the way to the end. Drop a comment and tell me what city you're watching from so I can see just how far this story travels. The auctioneer's name was Horace Beale, and in 30 years of selling human beings in Vicksburg, he had never once lost his composure. But on that sweltering afternoon in July of 1844, Horace Beale's hands were shaking. "Lot 47, he called out, his voice cracking in a way that made the buyers in the front row exchange glances. "Two females, age approximately 15. Sold as a pair, no exceptions." The murmur that rippled through the crowd was immediate. Buyers shifted on their feet. Plantation owners squinted at the two girls standing on the wooden platform, and not a single one of them could make sense of what they were seeing. One girl was dark. Her skin carried the deep, warm brown of her African mother. Her eyes were wide and defiant, and she stood with her chin raised as though daring every man in that crowd to look away first. Her name, the manifest said, was Dahlia. Beside her, close enough that their shoulders touched, stood her sister. And this is where every man in that audience felt his certainty begin to crack. Because Lily was white. Not light-skinned, not passing. White. Her hair fell in loose auburn waves. Her eyes were pale green. If she had been dressed in a proper gown and sat on the porch of any plantation house in Mississippi, no one would have questioned her presence there. But Lily was not free. Lily was property. And she was holding her sister's hand so tightly that her knuckles had gone bloodless. "This is a trick," someone shouted from the back. "You trying to sell us a white girl, Beale?" Horace wiped his forehead with a soiled handkerchief. "No trick. I've got the papers right here. Same mother, same father, born the same night, same hour, same bed. The physician who delivered them signed an affidavit. These girls are twins." Silence. Then Silas Belmont pushed through the crowd. Everyone in Warren County knew Silas. He owned the largest cotton operation between Vicksburg and Natchez. He was a man who believed he understood the natural order of the world, and he enforced that order with a cruelty that even other slaveholders found excessive. His overseers carried whips with lead tips. His field hands worked until they dropped. And when Silas Belmont walked toward that auction block with his jaw set and his eyes locked on those two girls, every person in that crowd understood that something terrible was about to begin. "How much?" Silas said. Horace hesitated. "The opening bid is set at $800 for the pair." I said how much to end this right now. "Mr. Belmont, there are other interested parties who—" $2,400. The crowd went dead silent. $2,400 for two teenage girls was unheard of. It was the price of prime field hands in their 20s, strong and broken in. These were children. A man in a gray coat near the front stepped forward. "What do you want with them, Belmont?" Silas didn't look at him. He kept his gaze fixed on the twins. "That's none of your concern." "It is if you're buying a white girl to—" Silas turned, and whatever the man saw in his face made him stop talking. "She's not white," Silas said, his voice low and precise. "She's property, same as her sister, same as every soul I own, and I'll do with them as I see fit." He turned back to Horace. "Take my money, load them in my cart, and if anyone here has an objection, they can bring it to my front gate, and I'll answer it with buckshot." No one objected. Dahlia and Lily were led off the platform in chains, and as they walked past the silent crowd, something happened that would be talked about in Vicksburg for decades. Dahlia turned her head to the left, and at the exact same moment, Lily turned her head to the right. Their movements were perfectly synchronized, like mirrors placed facing each other. And both girls spoke at the same time, in the same voice, the same words. "He doesn't know what he's bought." A woman in the crowd fainted. Two men crossed themselves. Horace Beale sat down on the auction block and did not get up for a very long time. The cart ride to the Belmont plantation took 4 hours. Silas sat in the front, his back rigid, his rifle across his knees. He did not speak to the girls. He did not look at them. But his driver, an enslaved man named Solomon, could not stop glancing over his shoulder. "Stop staring," Silas snapped. Solomon faced forward, but a few minutes later, he whispered to himself, barely loud enough to hear, "Lord have mercy, those girls breathing at the same time." He was right. Dahlia and Lily sat in the back of that cart, their wrists bound, their ankles chained, and they breathed in perfect unison. Inhale together, exhale together. Their chests rose and fell like a single body operating 2 sets of lungs. When they arrived at the Belmont estate, Silas did not take the girls to the slave quarters. He did not assign them to the kitchen or the laundry or the fields. Instead, he walked them directly into the main house, up the stairs, and into a locked room on the 3rd floor that had not been opened in years. His wife, Catherine, met him on the landing. "Silas, what in God's name are you doing? You can't bring them in here." "I can, and I have." "The dark one perhaps, but the other girl is clearly—" "The other girl is nothing. She's an oddity, a freak of nature, and she's going to make us the most talked-about family in Mississippi." Catherine stared at him. "What are you planning?" Silas locked the door to the room where the twins now sat in darkness. He pocketed the key and looked at his wife with an expression she had never seen before. It was not greed. It was not cruelty, though both of those things lived in him every day. It was fascination. "I'm planning," he said, "to find out what those girls really are." The first examination happened the next morning. Silas brought in Dr. Marcus Webb, a physician from Jackson who had written papers on what he called racial taxonomy. Webb was a man who believed that the differences between human beings could be measured, catalogued, and ranked. He arrived with calipers, measuring tapes, and a leather journal filled with numbers. "Separate them," Webb instructed. Solomon and another man pulled the twins apart. The reaction was instantaneous. Both girls cried out, not in words, but in a sound that made every person in that room take a step backward. It was a single note, rising from 2 throats, and it did not sound human. "Interesting," Webb said, writing in his journal. He did not look up. He measured their skulls. He measured their limbs. He pressed his stethoscope against their chests and listened for a long time. Then he asked them to speak. "Say your name," he said to Dahlia. Dahlia said nothing. But Lily, across the room, with her back turned, whispered, "Her name is Dahlia. My name is Lily, and we are not something for you to measure." Webb looked at Silas. "How did she hear me? I was whispering." "She didn't hear you," Silas said. "She knew." Webb set down his instruments. He stood very still. Then he asked Solomon to bring a mirror. What happened next would be described in 3 separate letters, all written that same evening by 3 different people who were in the room, and all 3 letters said the same thing. When the mirror was placed in front of Dahlia, her reflection appeared. Normal. Expected. But when Lily was brought to stand beside her, the reflection changed. It did not show 2 girls. It showed one figure, one face, with features that seemed to shift between dark and light, as though the glass itself could not decide what it was seeing. Webb dropped his journal. "That's not possible." "You see it too," Silas said. "I see something. I don't know what I see." Catherine Belmont, who had been watching from the doorway, stepped into the room. Her voice was barely a whisper. "Silas, send them away. Send them back. Whatever they are, they don't belong here." But Silas Belmont had no intention of sending them anywhere, because Silas Belmont had realized something that Dr. Webb, with all his instruments and his certainty, had missed entirely. These girls were not a curiosity. They were not a scientific anomaly. They were proof of something that no one in the antebellum South wanted to believe, something that threatened the very foundation of everything men like Silas had built their fortunes on. If one soul could inhabit 2 bodies, one black and one white, then the entire system that said those bodies were different, that one was superior and the other inferior, that one deserved freedom and the other deserved chains, that system was a lie. And Silas Belmont would burn those girls alive before he let that truth get out. That night, alone in the locked room on the 3rd floor, Dahlia pressed her palm flat against the wall. On the other side of that wall, in a room Silas had moved her to just hours before, Lily pressed her palm in exactly the same place. "They're going to kill us," Dahlia said. And Lily, through the wall, through the wood and plaster and silence, answered in the same breath, "Not if we become what they're afraid of first." Outside, the summer heat pressed down on Vicksburg like a hand. The cotton stood tall in the fields. The river moved slow and dark toward the sea. And somewhere in the Belmont house, a mirror sat covered with a cloth, because no one in that household could bear to look at what it showed them. The cloth stayed over that mirror for 3 days, but what it hid did not stay hidden. By the 2nd week of August, 1844, word had already spread beyond the Belmont plantation. Solomon told the cook told the washerwomen told their children, and their children whispered it across fence lines and cotton rows until every enslaved person within 10 miles of Vicksburg knew the story. 2 girls, one black, one white, one soul. And Silas Belmont was trying to break it apart. He started with separation. He moved Lily to the cellar beneath the kitchen and kept Dahlia locked on the 3rd floor, 2 stories of wood and brick between them. He believed distance would sever whatever unholy thread connected them. He was wrong. On the first night of separation, every door in the Belmont house opened at once. Not slowly, not one by one. Every door, from the front entrance to the pantry closet, slammed open at the same instant, as though the house itself had exhaled. Catherine screamed from her bedroom. Silas grabbed his rifle and stormed into the hallway. Solomon stood at the bottom of the stairs, his face gray. "It's them," Solomon said. "You know it's them." "Shut your mouth," Silas said. "It was the wind." "There is no wind tonight, sir." Silas hit him, a backhanded blow that split Solomon's lip and sent him stumbling against the wall. "I said it was the wind. Now go check every door and lock them again." Solomon wiped the blood from his mouth and did as he was told. But when he reached the cellar door, he stopped. From behind it, he could hear Lily's voice, low and steady, speaking words that were not English. And from 3 floors above, faint but unmistakable, Dahlia's voice answered in perfect unison, speaking the same unknown language. Solomon locked the door. He walked away. And he did not sleep that night. By September 1844,
Silas had brought in 4 more men to examine the twins.
The first was a professor from the University of Virginia who had published theories about inherited traits. He spent 2 hours with the girls and left without saying a word to anyone. He was found 3 days later in a Natchez hotel room, writing the same sentence over and over in his notebook. One divided cannot be understood by the undivided. The second was a minister from Baton Rouge named Reverend Amos Crawford. Silas met him at the door. "I need you to tell me what's inside those girls." Crawford smiled the patient smile of a man who believed he had seen everything. "Mr. Belmont, I've cast out demons from Mobile to Memphis. Whatever afflicts your property, I assure you, the Lord's word is sufficient." Silas led him to the 3rd floor. Dahlia sat in the corner, her knees drawn to her chest. Crawford opened his Bible. He began to read. Dahlia raised her head. "Your God didn't write that book for people like me, Reverend." Crawford stopped reading. "All souls belong to God, child." "Then why does your God let men like him own mine?" Crawford had no answer. He turned to Silas, who stood in the doorway with his arms crossed. "She's sharp-tongued, but I see no evidence of—" "Bring the other one up," Silas ordered. Solomon brought Lily from the cellar. The moment she entered the room, Crawford's Bible fell from his hands. He did not drop it. It moved. It flew from his grip, as though yanked by an invisible cord, and landed open on the floor between the 2 girls. Lily looked down at the page. Dahlia looked down at the same page. And together, in that same voice, they read aloud a passage that Crawford himself had never preached, from a chapter he had never studied, in a translation he did not recognize. Crawford backed out of the room. He did not pick up his Bible. He left the plantation within the hour, and when Silas sent a letter demanding an explanation, Crawford's reply was 4 words: "Do not write again." The 3rd examiner was a man named Dr. Julian Marsh, a surgeon from New Orleans, with a reputation for treating what he called disorders of the nervous system. Marsh was not a man who frightened easily. He had performed amputations on battlefields and dissected cadavers in public theaters. He arrived at the Belmont estate on October 3rd, 1844, with a leather bag full of instruments and a confidence that bordered on arrogance. "Show me the phenomenon," Marsh said, as though he were ordering a meal. Silas brought both girls into the parlor. Marsh studied them for a long moment. Then he reached into his bag and produced a long pin. "I'm going to prick the dark one's finger," he said to Silas. "Watch the other." He pressed the pin into Dahlia's left index finger. A bead of blood rose to the surface. At the exact same instant, Lily gasped. She held up her own left hand. Blood was forming on her index finger. There was no pin. There was no wound. But the blood was real. Marsh dropped the pin. He picked it up. He pricked Dahlia's right hand. Same result. Lily bled. He pricked Lily's arm. Dahlia bled. "This is not possible," Marsh whispered. "I've been saying that for 3 months," Silas said. "Now tell me what it is." Marsh sat down. He was quiet for a long time. Then he looked at Silas with an expression that no one in the room expected. It was fear. "Mr. Belmont, I have spent my entire career studying the human body. I have held a beating heart in my hands. I have mapped nerves and traced blood vessels and catalogued every organ that keeps a man alive. And I am telling you now, with absolute certainty, that what is happening between these 2 girls does not exist within the boundaries of medical science." "Then what is it?" "I don't know, but I know what it isn't. It isn't a trick, it isn't disease, and it isn't something you can beat out of them, or pray out of them, or cut out of them." He paused. "If I were you, I would let them go." Silas laughed. It was a cold, hard sound. "Let them go. You want me to free $2,400 worth of property because you can't explain a parlor trick? This is not a parlor trick. Then what do you suggest I do? Marsh closed his bag. He stood. He walked to the door, and before he left, he said something that would echo through the Belmont house for years to come. I suggest you stop asking what they are, Mr. Belmont, and start asking what they're becoming. Silas did not take the advice. Instead, he escalated. By November 1844, he had constructed a wooden partition inside the third-floor room, splitting it in half. He placed Dahlia on one side and Lily on the other. He nailed the boards so tightly together that not even light could pass through. He posted Solomon outside the door with orders to report any sound, any movement, anything at all. For 3 nights, there was silence. Solomon sat in a chair outside the room and heard nothing. Silas began to believe that the barrier was working, that whatever connected the twins could be blocked by simple wood and nails. On the 4th night, Solomon heard singing. It came from both sides of the partition at once, the same melody, the same words, a song in that same language no one recognized. Solomon pressed his ear to the door and listened. Then the singing stopped, and Solomon heard something that made him stand up so fast his chair fell backward. A knocking. From inside the partition itself, not from Dahlia's side, not from Lily's side, from inside the wood, as though something was trapped between the boards, something that had no body but desperately wanted one. Solomon ran. He found Silas in his study. "Mr. Belmont, you need to hear this." "I'm not going up there." "Sir, there's something in the wall." Silas looked at Solomon. And for the first time since he had bought those girls, Solomon saw something crack behind his master's eyes. Not compassion, not guilt, something far more dangerous. Doubt. "Get me the axe," Silas said. He climbed the stairs. He stood before the partition. The knocking had stopped, but the silence was worse. It was thick and heavy and alive. Silas raised the axe. He swung it into the wood. The boards split, and from the gap between the 2 halves, a sound poured out that made Silas drop the axe and press his hands over his ears. It was not a scream. It was not a voice. It was a vibration, a frequency that seemed to come from inside his own skull, as though his bones were resonating with something ancient and furious. When it stopped, Silas lowered his hands. He looked through the gap in the partition. Both girls were standing, facing each other through the broken wood. Their eyes were open, their mouths were closed, and between them, in the narrow space where the boards had been, the air shimmered like heat rising off summer pavement. Dahlia spoke first. "You can't separate what was never two." Lily finished the sentence without pause. "You can only make it angry." Silas stumbled backward. He hit the wall. He slid to the floor. And Solomon, who had followed him up the stairs and seen everything, would later tell the other enslaved people on the plantation that in that moment, for the first time in his life, he watched Silas Belmont pray. It did not help. By December 1844, Catherine Belmont had stopped leaving her bedroom. She refused to eat meals in the dining room. She refused to walk past the 3rd-floor staircase. She told Silas, through their bedroom door, that she wanted the girls sold, burned, drowned. She did not care which, but she wanted them gone. Silas sat on the other side of that door and said nothing, because Silas Belmont had realized something that terrified him more than any sound from any wall. He could not sell them. No buyer in Mississippi would touch them. The story had spread too far. He could not free them. A white-looking girl walking free with papers claiming she was a slave would unravel every legal fiction that held the South together. And he could not kill them, because on the night he had thought about it, just thought about it, lying in his bed with the idea forming like smoke in his mind. Both girls had begun to scream from the third floor. A single unbroken scream that lasted until dawn. They knew. They always knew. And Silas Belmont, the most powerful planter in Warren County, the man who believed he could own anything and break anyone, sat alone in his hallway and understood for the first time that he was not the master in this house. He never had been. By January 1845, Silas Belmont had stopped sleeping. Solomon could hear him pacing the second-floor hallway at all hours, muttering to himself, dragging his fingers along the walls as though searching for something hidden inside them. The man who had once commanded 200 enslaved souls with a single glance now flinched at the sound of his own footsteps. But Silas was not broken, not yet, because broken men surrender, and Silas Belmont did not know how to surrender. He only knew how to escalate. On the morning of January 14th, 1845, he called Solomon to his study. Solomon entered and found Silas sitting behind his desk with a letter in his hand. His eyes were red. His shirt was unbuttoned. He looked like a man who had been arguing with God and losing. "I've written to a man in Charleston," Silas said. "His name is Dr. Harlan Crow. He specializes in cases that other men refuse to touch. He'll be here by the end of the month." Solomon stood very still. "What kind of cases, sir?" "The kind that involve cutting." Solomon felt his stomach drop. "Sir, if you cut one of them, the other bleeds. Dr. Marsh proved that. If you go further than a pinprick, I know what Marsh proved." "Then you know that cutting one of those girls could kill them both." Silas set the letter down. He looked at Solomon with an expression so empty it was almost peaceful. "Maybe that's the point." Solomon took a step back. In all his years serving this man, through every beating and humiliation and cruelty, he had never once considered defying him. But something shifted in that moment. Something that felt like the ground tilting beneath his feet. "You're going to murder them," Solomon said. "It was not a question. I'm going to find out what they are. If they survive the finding out, good. If they don't, then the problem solves itself." "And if the white one dies? If a girl who looks like your own daughter dies on your property under a surgeon's knife? What do you tell the county? What do you tell your wife?" Silas slammed his fist on the desk. "She is not white. She is a slave. Her papers say slave. The law says slave. And I say slave. And if you question me again, Solomon, I will remind you that your papers say the same thing." Solomon lowered his eyes. He left the room. But he did not go to the kitchen. He did not go to the quarters. He went to the third floor. The door was locked, as always. Solomon pressed his hand flat against it. From inside, Dahlia's voice came through the wood, calm and clear. "He's going to bring someone to cut us open." Solomon closed his eyes. "How do you know that?" "Because Lily can feel it." "She feels what he decides before he speaks it. She says his mind is loud, full of blades. I'm trying to help you." A pause. Then Lily's voice, softer but carrying the same weight. "We know, Solomon. You're the only one in this house whose thoughts don't hurt us." Solomon pressed his forehead against the door. "What do you need me to do?" Dahlia answered. "Nothing yet, but when the time comes, don't look away." Dr. Harlan Crow arrived on February 2nd, 1845. He was a tall man, thin as wire, with hands that moved in quick, precise gestures. He carried a black case that was larger than any medical bag Solomon had ever seen, and when he set it on the parlor table, the instruments inside clinked together like bones in a sack. Silas met him with whiskey and a handshake. "I assume you've read my letters." "Every word," Crow said.
Fascinating case. Truly fascinating.
I've encountered sympathetic responses between twins before, but nothing approaching what you've described. It's beyond sympathy. It's beyond anything anyone has seen. Then let me see it for myself. Silas led Crow to the third floor. When the door opened, both girls were sitting on opposite sides of the room, Dahlia against the far wall, Lily near the window. They did not look up when the men entered. Crow studied them for a full minute without speaking. Then he opened his case and removed a small silver hammer, the kind used to test reflexes. "I'm going to tap the Dark One's knee," he told Silas. "Standard reflex examination." He knelt beside Dahlia. He tapped her right knee. Her leg kicked forward. Across the room, Lily's right leg kicked at the same instant. Crow's eyebrows rose. He tapped Dahlia's left knee. Both girls responded. He stood. He walked to Lily and tapped her right knee. Both girls responded. "Remarkable," Crow whispered. He was smiling. It was not a kind smile. "Now watch this," Silas said. He grabbed Dahlia's arm and pinched the skin hard. Dahlia winced. Lily cried out and clutched her own arm. A red mark bloomed on Lily's skin in the exact shape of Silas's fingers, though he had never touched her. Crow set down his hammer. He reached into his bag and produced a scalpel. "What are you doing?" Solomon said from the doorway. "I need to see if the response extends to deeper tissue," Crow said, his voice clinical, detached. "You're going to cut her?" Crow did not look at Solomon. "A small incision, superficial." "There is nothing superficial about what happens between these girls. If you cut one, the other bleeds. Truly bleeds." Crow finally turned. "That is precisely what I'm here to verify." He looked at Silas for permission. Silas nodded. Crow took Dahlia's arm. Dahlia did not resist. She did not flinch. She looked directly at the surgeon with eyes so steady that Crow hesitated for just a fraction of a second. Then he pressed the scalpel against her forearm and made a cut, 2 inches long, shallow but deliberate. Blood welled from the wound. Dahlia did not make a sound. Lily screamed. Everyone turned. Lily was holding her own forearm. Blood was soaking through her sleeve. Solomon rushed to her and pushed the fabric back. There, on her pale skin, was an identical wound, 2 inches long, in the exact same location, blood flowing freely from flesh that no blade had touched. Crow dropped the scalpel. It clattered on the wooden floor. His hands were shaking. "My God," he said. "Your God has nothing to do with this," Dahlia said. Her voice was steady. Her eyes had not left Crow's face. "You wanted to see what we are, Doctor. Now you've seen. Was it worth it?" Crow did not answer. He was staring at Lily's wound, watching the blood run between her fingers, and the color had drained from his face so completely that he looked almost as pale as the girl he had inadvertently cut. Silas grabbed Crow's shoulder. "Pull yourself together. This is exactly what I told you. Now explain it." "I can't explain it." "You told me in your letter that you could explain anything." "I was wrong." Silas shoved him against the wall. "Then what good are you?" Crow straightened his coat. He took a breath. And then he said something that changed the course of everything that followed. "Mr. Belmont, I cannot explain what connects these girls, but I can tell you what I believe. I believe they share a single nervous system, not metaphorically, not spiritually, physically. Whatever happened in the womb that made one dark and one light did not fully divide them. They are, in the most literal sense, one organism in 2 bodies." Silas released him. "One organism?" "Yes. Then if I destroy one body, the other dies." Crow stared at him. "That is the logical conclusion, yes. And if I keep both bodies alive, but in pain, they both suffer. The room went very quiet. Solomon took a step forward. Mr. Belmont, get out, Solomon. Sir, please. I said, get out. Solomon left, but he did not go far. He stood on the landing and listened through the door, and what he heard Silas Belmont say next would haunt him for the rest of his life. If pain passes between them, Silas said to Crow, then so does obedience. If I break one, I break both. And if I break both, I own something no man has ever owned before. Total control over a single soul. Crow picked up his bag. I won't be part of this. You already are. I came here as a man of science. And you'll leave here as a man who knows what I know. Which means you'll keep your mouth shut, or I'll make sure every medical society from here to Boston knows you performed surgery on an enslaved child without anesthesia. Crow went pale. He understood. This was not a threat. It was a cage, and he had walked into it willingly. That night, February 2nd, 1845, Solomon made a decision. He waited until Silas retired to his bedroom and Catherine's laudanum had pulled her into sleep. Then he climbed to the third floor with a ring of keys he had copied months ago for emergencies he hoped would never come. He unlocked the door. Both girls were awake. They were always awake now. He's going to use pain to control you, Solomon whispered. Both of you. He told the doctor tonight. Dahlia stood. We heard him. You couldn't have heard him. The door was closed. I was the only one on the landing. We didn't hear him with our ears, Solomon. Solomon felt a chill move through him. Then how? Lily stood too. She walked toward Solomon and placed her hand on his chest, right above his heart. The same way we can hear what you're about to say before you say it. Solomon swallowed. I'm going to get you out. Dahlia shook her head. No, you're not, because if we leave, he'll hunt us. A white girl and a black girl running together will be caught before we reach the river. And when he catches us, he'll kill you first to make us watch. Then what do we do? The twins looked at each other, and for the first time since Solomon had known them, they smiled. It was not a happy smile. It was not a hopeful smile. It was the smile of someone who has seen the ending of a story that everyone else is still living through. We do what he's most afraid of, Dahlia said. We stop being two, Lily finished. Solomon did not understand. He locked the door. He returned the keys. He went to his quarters and lay on his cot and stared at the ceiling until the sun came up. But at 3 a.m, something happened in the Belmont house that every person on that property heard. Every enslaved man, woman, and child. Every overseer in his cabin. Catherine Belmont in her drugged sleep. Even Silas, who had bolted his bedroom door and pushed a dresser against it. A sound rose from the 3rd floor. Not a scream, not a song, not a voice. It was a vibration that passed through the walls and floors and earth itself, a frequency that made teeth ache and bones hum and hearts skip. Dogs howled from 3 plantations over, horses broke their stalls and ran into the darkness. And when the sound stopped, just before dawn on February 3rd, 1845, the lock on the 3rd floor door was found melted. Not broken, not picked. Melted, as though heat beyond measure had been applied to the metal from the inside. The room behind it was empty. Both girls were gone, and on the wall where Dahlia had pressed her palm months before, and on the opposite wall where Lily had pressed hers, 2 handprints remained, burned deep into the wood. One dark, one light, overlapping perfectly, as though 2 hands had become one. Silas Belmont tore the 3rd floor apart with his bare hands. He ripped the boards from the partition,
He pulled nails from the walls.
He overturned the cot, shredded the blankets, and clawed at the floorboards until his fingers bled. Solomon stood in the doorway and watched and said nothing because there was nothing to say. The girls were gone. The melted lock lay on the floor like a dead thing. And those two handprints, one dark, one light, burned into opposite walls, and meeting in the middle, still radiated heat 3 hours after dawn on February 3rd, 1845.
"Find them," Silas said. His voice was raw.
"Take every man on this property. Take the dogs. Take the horses. Find them before sundown, or I will hold you personally responsible." Solomon gathered the overseers. He gathered the hounds. They searched the plantation from fence line to fence line. They searched the riverbank. They searched the roads north and south. They questioned every enslaved person on the property, and every single one of them said the same thing. They heard the sound. They felt it in their chests. And when it stopped, they knew the girls were gone. Not escaped, gone, as though the earth itself had opened and swallowed them whole. By noon, Silas had mounted his horse and ridden into Vicksburg. He went to the sheriff, a man named Davenport, who owed him 3 seasons of unpaid debts. "2 slaves missing from my property," Silas said. "One dark-skinned girl, one light. They'll be traveling together." Davenport leaned back in his chair. "Belmont, the whole county's been talking about those twins of yours. Half the people I know say they're witches. The other half say they're demons. You sure you want them back? I paid $2,400 for them. And I'd say you overpaid." Davenport paused. "I'll send word out, but I'll tell you straight, if those girls don't want to be found, I got a feeling they won't be." Silas rode home. He locked himself in his study. Catherine came to the door at supper time and knocked.
"Silas, are they gone? Are they truly gone?"
"Yes." Catherine pressed her hands together.
Thank God, Silas. Now we can go back to how things were. Now we can—"
"Nothing is going back," Silas said through the door. "Nothing is going anywhere. Those girls are my property, and I will recover them if it takes me the rest of my life." Catherine stopped knocking. She returned to her bedroom. And that night, for the first time in months, the Belmont house was silent. No singing, no vibration, no synchronized breathing through the walls, just silence, heavy and absolute, like the silence after a funeral. But the silence did not last. On February 10th, 1845, 1 week after the twins vanished, a farmer named Hicks, who owned a small property 6 miles north of the Belmont estate, rode into Vicksburg in a state of visible agitation. He went straight to Davenport's office. "I saw something on my land last night," Hicks said. 2 figures standing at the edge of my cotton field. One dark, one light. They weren't moving, they weren't speaking. They were just standing there, side by side, looking at my house. Davenport sent 2 men to investigate. They found nothing, no footprints, no tracks, no evidence that anyone had stood in that field. 3 days later, a woman named Mrs. Aldridge, who lived on a property 4 miles east of the Belmonts, came to town with the same story. 2 figures, one dark, one light, standing at the edge of her property at dusk. She called out to them. They did not respond. She sent her husband out with a lantern. By the time he reached the spot, they were gone. A week after that, a traveling preacher named Gideon Cole reported seeing the figures on the road between Vicksburg and Natchez. He said he approached them on horseback and got within 20 feet before they turned to face him. And what he saw made him pull his horse to a stop. They weren't 2 people, Cole told anyone who would listen in the Vicksburg tavern. I mean, they were standing there as 2, but their faces, Lord help me, their faces kept shifting. The dark one's features would lighten, and the light one's features would darken, and for just a second, just a heartbeat, they looked like the same woman, the same exact woman. And then they separated again, and then they were gone.
People laughed at Cole. People called him a drunk and a liar.
Approached, and then vanishing so completely that even the dogs lost the scent. Silas heard every report. He chased every sighting. He rode out at dusk with his rifle and his rage, and he searched fields and roads and riverbanks until his horse was foaming and his hands were shaking. He never found them. He never even came close.
By June 1845, the sightings changed. They were no longer two figures. The reports that came in now described a single woman standing alone, with skin that seemed to shift between dark and light, depending on the angle. Witnesses said she had 4 eyes, 2 looking forward, 2 looking to the sides, as though she could see in every direction at once. Some said she was young. Some said she was ancient. All of them said the same thing when asked how she made them feel. Afraid. Not of her, of what she represented. Solomon was the first person on the Belmont plantation to see her. It was a Tuesday evening, June 17th, 1845. He was walking from the kitchen to his quarters when he felt a presence behind him. He turned, and there she was, one woman, standing in the space between the main house and the slave quarters. Her skin rippled like water, shifting from deep brown to pale white and back again. Her eyes, all 4 of them, fixed on Solomon with an expression that was neither anger nor sorrow. It was recognition. "Solomon," she said, and her voice was both voices, Dahlia and Lily, woven together into a single sound that made Solomon's knees buckle. "Lord have mercy," he whispered. "What happened to you? We became what he was afraid of. Are you... which one? Are you Dahlia or... We are not Dahlia. We are not Lily. We are what we always were. One soul. One whole." They divided us at birth, put us in 2 bodies, called one black and one white, said one was less and one was more, built their entire world on that lie. Solomon was weeping. He did not know when he had started. "What do you want?" "We want him to see us, one more time. We want him to look at what he tried to destroy and understand what it means. He'll try to kill you. He can't kill what was never born divided." Solomon wiped his face. "I'll bring him." He walked to the main house. He climbed the stairs. He knocked on Silas Belmont's study door. When Silas opened it, Solomon looked at the man who had owned him for 23 years and spoke without lowering his eyes. "She's here. They're here. Whatever they are now, it's standing in your yard, and it's asking for you." Silas grabbed his rifle. He pushed past Solomon and went down the stairs and out the front door. He stepped into the yard, and he saw her. The rifle slipped from his hands. It hit the ground, and he did not pick it up. She stood 30 feet away. Her skin moved like clouds passing over the sun, dark to light, light to dark. Her 4 eyes held him with a gaze so steady and so deep that Silas felt every wall he had ever built inside himself begin to crack. "You bought us," she said. "You caged us. You cut us. You tried to break a soul in half because that's what your whole world does. It takes what is whole and divides it. Calls one half master and the other half slave. Calls one half human and the other half property. And you believed it. You believed it so deeply that when you saw the proof that it was a lie, 2 bodies sharing one soul, one black and one white, inseparable, equal, identical in every way that matters, you didn't question your belief. You tried to destroy the proof." Silas opened his mouth. No words came out. "We are not your proof," she said. "We are not your property. We are not your mystery to solve. We are the truth you spent your whole life running from. That there is no difference. There never was. You built an empire on a lie, Silas Belmont. And now the lie is standing in front of you, wearing the face of everything you refused to see. Silas fell to his knees, not in prayer, not in surrender, in collapse. The way a building falls when the foundation is pulled out from under it. Total, structural, irreversible.
Catherine watched from the upstairs window. Solomon watched from the porch. Every enslaved person on the property stood in the darkness and watched. And what they saw was a man who had believed himself to be the most powerful creature in his world, confronted with the one truth that power cannot survive, that the divisions he enforced were inventions, that the categories he killed to protect were fictions, that the soul does not recognize the borders men draw on skin. The figure turned. She walked toward the edge of the property, and as she moved, her form began to shimmer, to thin, to become translucent. Solomon called out to her, "Will we see you again?" She stopped. She turned those 4 eyes on him one last time.
You'll see me everywhere, in every person who carries 2 worlds inside them, in every child born between borders, in every soul that refuses to be divided.
And then she was gone. Not faded, not vanished.
Gone the way a wave is gone when it returns to the ocean, still existing, just no longer separate. Silas Belmont never recovered. He sold the plantation in August 1845 at a loss so severe it ruined him. He moved to a boarding house in Natchez. He spoke to no one. He died in the winter of 1851, alone, with a journal beside his bed that contained a single sentence written hundreds of times on every page. They were never 2. They were never 2. They were never 2. Solomon lived. He was sold with the property, but freed by the new owners in 1847. He traveled north. He settled in Ohio. And for the rest of his life, whenever someone asked him about the Belmont twins, he would sit very still for a moment, as though listening to a sound no one else could hear. And then he would say the same thing every time. They weren't twins. They were a lesson. And we still haven't learned it. The sightings continued for decades. One woman, shifting between dark and light, seen at the edges of plantations and crossroads and riverbanks throughout Mississippi. She never spoke again. She never had to. Her existence was the message. One soul, undivided, unowned, unbroken. And somewhere in the deep heart of Warren County, on the land where the Belmont house once stood, 2 handprints remain burned into a wall that no longer exists, in a room that no longer stands, on a foundation that the earth has long since swallowed. One dark, one light, pressed together so tightly that no force in this world or any other could ever pull them apart.